right, so this is our Metris Software platform. We're going to be going through several of the apps that we have. Right now you're seeing the main page that has a plethora of apps, and they all have different capabilities for an industrial process. So we're going to start here with our Display Studio app. In this app you can build different displays to show different parts of your process. Right here we are seeing the simulated gold process that we have built in the background so that we can show how this process can work, and we can monitor it as a simulation. So one of the backbones of Metris is its Display Studio app, and in this app you can use different tags to build custom trends. You could search any tag you'd like and customize it, and determine whatever period of time that you'd like to look at, whether it be the last 8 hours, last 24 hours, or the last month. One of the functionalities of it is you can build dashboards, and these are great to be references for anybody that's trying to monitor the system, whether that's a higher up management position or somebody that's looking at this every day and trying to control to it. This right here is a dashboard that highlights the power usage of this simulated process. In the upper left-hand side, you can see a bunch of different colored trends, and all of these individual lines are a motor power of a certain motor in the process. And this more bold black here is the total power being used in the mine. Below that, you see the same power tags and the limits shown that we want to see those powers to be running in. Of course, you got green for good, we're in the right range. Yellow, we're a little low, maybe a little high. And then when you're red, that means something's wrong or something may have been configured improperly. So you can see we have a few here that are in the red. The sag mill power is a little low, the pebble crusher is much higher than it should be, and everything else is relatively stable and looking okay. Over here on the right-hand side, we have the calculated power consumption that we are using. So that is power usage for the tonnage going out the mine, and we have a soft sensor for how much we want to be using. And hopefully those are really close to each other, and if not, we can see that something might be wrong. So the yellow and the green are the different calculations for the power consumption, and the red is the error that we're seeing between those two values. Finally, in the bottom right-hand side, we see a similar way of what we were seeing over here on the bottom left-hand, but more of a tree map. So we're seeing the same type of tags over the last 24 hours and how they've been running. This on the bottom left, it is the calculation based on whatever timestamp we have here, and the tree map is more of a general over the last day. And so we see something's really going on with this pebble crusher, so we can click it, and so these are two different ways of looking at similar data and whether or not this is a motor power that we would like to look into as something that might not be operating properly. After this, we're going to go into our reporting app. And this is a really easy way of building reports and generating them for very quick and easy data. You can customize the time frame that you want to look at, the tags and the data that you want plotted, and they're very easy to generate and very quick to look at. So these are a few of them that we have configured. It takes a few seconds for them to run, so I actually have one pre-ran here for us to view in Firefox. That's where they're generated, is in your browser. And it goes through some of the general detail of what this report is. Some of the KPIs, the average, max, minimum, and standard deviation for the tags that we want to look at, as well as some bar graphs that go into a little bit of detail individually of these power tags. And at the very end here, you see that they can all be put onto one trend, which may or may not be the most useful thing, but you can add and subtract these from the trend if you want to specifically look at a certain one or two, and you can see them trended together. And finally, we can break them down a little bit more detail into a control chart. Now these lines that you see the green line running through are the limits, the normal limits in yellow that are kind of warning limits, and the red limits as well, which means you're definitely out of limits and something needs to change. The black line shows the performance of how well the certain tag is doing. So over time, you can see it come up and do better within limits and then come down as it approaches those red lines. And this is a great way of seeing over the last, in this example, the last 24 hours, how your powers are running and if anything needs to be looked at. It's a different way of looking at it. You can generate this report as a PDF and send it to whoever you need to. So if somebody doesn't have access to Metris, but they want to see a trend like this, it's very easy to generate, very quick to get to the people that you need to get it to. All right. So heading back to Metris, when we're talking about power consumption, one thing comes to everybody's mind, and if it's not performing well, what does that mean? Cost is probably going up, right? So we have a cost management app that actually goes into detail of how much money you could be saving depending on the limits that you've put, how much the power costs, and so on and so forth. So on this main cost management page, we have a couple configurations for power consumption and water consumption. We'll focus on power for now. The two most useful portions of this are the cost panel and cost detail. The cost panel breaks everything down day by day and shows you how well you've been doing each day, whether you've been underperforming or overperforming, using too much power, too much water. And in this case, we're running in the yellow, so we could definitely be doing better, but we're still exceeding the baseline of a 9.5 in terms of kilowatts per ton being used. And if we want to go into more details, the cost detail page can expand on this and show you what variables we use to calculate the consumption and how well they are performing. So you see some of the power consumptions can be doing very well at 100%, so it's achieving that baseline, and some you might be using a little bit more than you'd like to. Now, is that an issue? Is that normal for how things should be running? Those can all be configured and changed depending on preference and depending how you want your process to run. So another one of the apps that we have in Metris is our OEE app, which stands for Overall Equipment Effectiveness. And the main page here goes through some of the details over the last month of how well the mill or the process has been performing. So we see the yellow, the red, something must have been happening these days that the mill wasn't doing as well as it should have. Your availability over the last 24 hours and how things have been running, your production losses over the month, and some other descriptions of how your feed rates have been going, because that's always important when it comes to your effectiveness of your equipment. And we can go even more detail with a stability and MSR trend. And these are very, very useful when you're looking at certain processes and how you've been running over a period of time. As you can see, you can customize what period of time you'd like to look at. For here we have the month of July so far. So we're looking at some of the main variables here are your MSR, which is minimal sustainable rate, which is at a 299 here. Our average is 234, or average uptime I should say, and our average right now being a 221. So that's under our MSR over the last month. So we know we could be doing better, and we have been doing better in the past. But this is a great tool to just look at your process over time and see if you need to make any changes to improve where you're running now or improve your MSR. Now, OEE is one of those apps that has a lot of information and a lot of things that even somebody who's been using this for a long time might forget, oh, where's this certain thing at? There is a very nifty tool up here, this question mark. If you click this, it will send you to a page that will go through detail of what the OEE app does and some of its capabilities. And of course, when you're going to a site from an external software, it might say it's not secure. Trust me, it's secure. So going to that page here, we can see some of the descriptions of OEE and where certain functionalities are and what details you might want to look at. And at the very bottom, You can even go into detail of frequently asked questions, a full user manual, and some training that you might need to freshen up on. So this is the same for every app. If you're in an app and you have questions, hitting that question mark button at the very top will send you to the applicable page here. So lastly here we have RBM, which stands for risk-based management. And this is a great app to look at certain assets in your process, certain motors, certain pumps, and how well they're performing based on certain variables in your process, whether that's process variables or online indicators such as a temperature indicator or a vibration indicator. If those are out of limits, you might want to look at that and see how much risk there is to running that piece of equipment or that asset. From the main page, we can split everything out into process to see which process might be running at the highest risk. Over here at the overall to the far right really gets into the detail of what we might be looking at. And to look at this in even more detail, going to the summary of assets page from this tab here will open all of those up. For example, we have the sag mill, which had the highest risk based on our overall page. And we see that inspection routes are at 90%. So some of these inspection routes that were ran through a different app say that there's an alarm on the bearings, which was a very high for risk of this certain asset. So this might be needing to looked into. This might need to be looked into. Other than that, we have process variables linked to this to the sag mill, and those being, of course, your feed rate, your weight, and your power. How are those looking? In terms of how this was set up, even though we might see that the KPI is high and it might not be operating to the best of its ability, it's very low in terms of risk of this asset. Here we have some online predictive. We only have one here that's a soft sensor, but this is where you would find your vibration tags, your temperature tags, to see if those are high KPI and if they're at risk to harm the piece of equipment. And you also have motors that are linked to this. So how's your average running load? How's your load variability? And so on and so forth. So that wraps up the presentation on some of these core apps of Metris. And all of these kind of fall under the umbrella of what we're trying to do in a certain process and how we want to optimize, maintain, and analyze certain aspects of the process.